Today we're going to be talking about reasonable compensation for nonprofits, which is outlined in 26 CFR 1.162 through 7. Now, throughout my presentation, I'm going to be taking more of an auditing standpoint rather than a financial perspective. So what is reasonable compensation, and why is it an accounting standard of nonprofits? Reasonable compensation, put plainly, is making sure that the payment of employee salaries or other compensation is the ordinary amount expected. This is very important for high-ranking officers in the company that they are not overpaid in relation to the benefit that they provide. This would be a problem because people then could create businesses set up as nonprofits, and as a result they could avoid taxes and have to pay less. Also keep in mind that if they did form a nonprofit and they're overpaying themselves, they could be paying themselves with donations intended for the company and intended for the good work of others. So next we're going to be looking at the 12 factors in audit examinations of reasonable compensation that you can include in your audit program. Now I realize that not everyone watching this video has taken an auditing class, so you guys might be a little confused. That's okay because I'll explain some of the the major parts of auditing and some of the minor auditing terms. So the two major parts of auditing are evaluating the internal control system and setting up audit programs to test to make sure that the company is in compliance with the regulations. So internal controls, for those of you who don't know what internal controls are, those are methods put in place by a company in order to ensure the integrity of financial accounting information. These can be things as like having people double count money, just extra safeguards put in place to make sure that everything is accurate and that people aren't stealing money from the company or doing other type of fraudulent activity. Next, I briefly mentioned the audit program. An audit program is an action plan that documents which procedures an auditor will follow in order to validate an organization is in conformance with compliance regulations. So moving on to the 12 factors here, the nature of an employee's duties, the employee background and experience, the employee's knowledge of the business, the size of the business, the employee's contribution to the profit making, the time devoted by the employee to the business, the economic conditions in general and locally. So whenever in here we're talking about the business or the employee in question is the employee that's getting a salary or some sort of compensation that we're making sure is reasonable. And the business is just the nonprofit. So the remaining 5 factors in the audit examinations is the character and the amount of responsibility of the employee, the time of year when compensation is determined, the relationship of shareholders, officers' compensation to stock holdings, whether alleged compensation is in reality, in whole or in part, payment for business or assets acquired, and the amount paid by similar-sized businesses in the same area to equally qualified employees for similar services. Now, one thing that kind of jumped out at me was the character of the employee, number 8. That can actually be one of the factors in audit examinations, because oftentimes people think of auditing and accounting in general as only a quantitative analysis, but it's actually qualitative analysis as well, just looking at things like that aren't necessarily based on numbers alone. So when I was looking for CPA practice problems for reasonable compensation, most of the ones I found were only multiple choice. So I figured rather than just show you a really simple multiple choice question, I'd show you kind of a case study and pull up an actual 990 tax form of Hal Lindsey Website Ministries, which kind of demonstrates what unreasonable compensation would look like. So here is the 990, and if you look at line 12, the total revenue, you can see that they made just over $8 million in 2015, and almost all of their money that they made, almost all of their revenue was directly contributions and grants, which you can see is also just over $8 million. So they really only made $26,000 through investment income, but other than that, they almost got all of their money, all their revenue through donations. So if you look down then into the expense category, you can see like one of their highest expenses, actually the highest expense, was salaries, other compensation, and employee benefits, which was $4.6 million. Now, $4.6 million is over 50% of the total revenue, and as you can see, it's clearly excessive. They don't have that many employees since most of it is just a website, so it's kind of a red flag right there. And under further analysis, they found out that Hal and Joe Lynn by themselves were actually using $4 million of this 4.6 themselves, and they were claiming that it was actually just like other employee benefits that have accumulated over time that they had not yet kind of attached to their salaries. So that's the way they defined it to the IRS, but the IRS was not very happy with them.